Greetings, cyberspace, and welcome to the Double Density Podcast. This is episode 3 with your hosts, Brian and Angelo. We'd like to kick off the episode by taking a look a little bit inward. So this is the first episode that Angelo and I are recording after having shared our initial podcast online. And we do have a couple of things we'd like to talk about concerning that, right, Angelo?
Yeah, I noticed a little glitch at the end of the first episode. Only after you had published it, I was excited to hear the actual published product on my Overcast app and listened all the way through, and there was a bit of a cutout at the end.
Right, so there was a bit of silence and then the ending theme had come up.
Yeah, and it's really not any of our fault. It's GarageBand's fault and how it works,
Well,
right?
essentially, so you and I both, I said essentially, which is another thing we'll talk about in a second.
Yes.
Both you and I are not to blame for this. We, as Ja Rule did last week for the Fire Festival, we claim responsibility, yet no responsibility for any of this.
None.
So we've thrown our podcast out into the wild, and we've gotten a lot of really funny responses. The most two common to me are people have asked me about your whispering tendencies. Someone even went so far as to say that perhaps you were on the lam or hiding, which is why you whispered during the first episode.
So no, that's because I wasn't sure how loud this was going to be. So I don't really have a recording studio. Our family computer, or my computer really, is in the middle of the living room. And the way my house is made, it's got 3 floors, but the living room is on the ground floor, and then upstairs are the kids' rooms and our bedroom. And I don't want to wake up the kids, but after a few weeks of doing this, my wife has told me that it's really not too bad as long as her door is closed and the kids' doors are always closed and everybody sleeps soundly, so I can actually speak normally as I'm speaking now. But that first week, as well as the initial test episodes, I was kind of whispering a little too much. So I think this is better. I hope anyway. And I'm not running from the law. I'm very much lawful good if I was Dungeons & Dragons character.
Have you ever played Dungeons & Dragons?
I have never played Dungeons & Dragons.
Would you want to, ever?
So I like a lot of nerdy stuff, but that seems overly nerdy. I don't know. I look, I won't pass the judgment on people that play Dungeons & Dragons. A lot of people I admire play Dungeons & Dragons. I think you play Dungeons & Dragons. I like you, I guess.
I have played in the past. I'm not playing currently. That is correct.
It seems really complicated, though.
It is and it isn't. If you understand some of the RPG mechanics, it's fine. I mostly, unfortunately, or fortunately, I guess, for the rest of my party, I was the team troll, so I wasn't really playing very seriously.
So troll as in a troll like that lives under the bridge, or troll as in the internet troll?
Like a conceptual troll.
Oh, okay.
So make the dumb decisions, do the dumb things, kind of. I was the id of the team, pretty much.
So kind of a mix of both, an actual troll and an internet troll.
Exactly. So something else that we both have noticed are things in our speech patterns that we'd like to work on here on out.
Yeah, so there's a few things we noticed that we both say. I was being really conscious of not trying to say and a lot, and I've realized that's not a big deal because people kind of filter that out automatically. I've in the podcast I listen to now, I'm making a concerted effort of listening to what they say, and I realized I hardly notice when they say and and like, but I do notice when I say I mean, and I say that a lot.
Do you say it with your hands up? Like, do you say I mean sort of like clench your hands together?
No, it's just a way I speak. I think I initially started saying that so that I wouldn't say something like or or
So it's your mental placeholder.
I think so. It's my version of
Okay.
which is also fine. I think we're not going to be perfect, right? We're just regular guys. We want to have a fun little conversation. People want to listen to us, I hope. So I'm not going to worry about it too much. It's just something I noticed about myself that I kind of find annoying. And I'm pretty sure nobody else noticed until I just pointed it out. And now they're going to find it annoying and maybe message me when I say something.
Well, I hope they do. I hope that, they send you things. And it's okay because, I say essentially and things like that a lot, or basically a lot, to try and summarize things. But really, when I try to summarize, I just ramble.
But your rambling's fun.
It kind of gets meandering after a while, and I kind of have to cut it off.
Luckily, I mean, people don't even notice when we say certain things because you cut them out of the show anyway.
Exactly. It's all fixed in post.
Like, you can cut that out and people might not even realize I said it.
For sure, I could be redacting all of your important points all at once.
It could just be you talking to dead air.
You know what? It wouldn't be the first time. Double density. So this week was our first week setting things up, and through it, we've discovered that you're actually an old man.
So I'm an old man when it comes to certain things. Yeah, so I tried to set up a banner on Facebook. I'm not a big fan of Facebook. I use it basically to show people pictures of my kids and keep in contact with friends, because people my age use Facebook a lot, and we seem to have latched onto it. But when it comes to certain parts of it, I couldn't figure out how to get our banner onto the Facebook thing. I kind of added it as its own album or something like that. I don't know what you said I did, but I'm not even sure how I did it.
You uploaded it to an untitled album instead of actually fixing it as a banner on Facebook, and then you messaged me online saying I don't know what I'm doing.
And then I think I ended up installing a hotbar on your computer by mistake. So see, that's the type of thing I wouldn't get caught off doing, right? I'm kind of careful of stuff like that, but once it comes to things like, I mean, I get Twitter quite well. That I understand how to do. Did I just say I mean? I did it, didn't I? I get Twitter. Okay, I like Twitter basically because I use the third-party clients on my phone. I can't stand the regular Twitter client online or on the phone. I'm what you would probably think of as an app hipster. If I don't pay money for an app, I'm not going to use it.
That's a hot take right there.
Yeah, look, I'm not going to use the free garbage apps they give you on the phone. Unless they're made by Apple, I guess those are pretty okay. Some of them are pretty garbage though, like the podcast app. Actually, should cut that out. Apple might just take us off the iTunes store.
I feel like you're really good at proactive stuff. So this week there was that whole Google Docs phishing scam going around, and you got a couple of emails at work, I think.
Yeah, some of the people I communicate with, all of a sudden I had an email from them. They're not from within the office. At work we don't use Google Docs, but I got a couple of emails from people I'd communicated with that they were sharing a Google Doc with me, and that I found that kind of odd, but I get all kinds of documents, right? So I went, I clicked on the email, and there was an email from the person, but there was also a CC of some bizarre email address. So right away that tipped me off that it wasn't legit. And within seconds, I got another email from a different person with the exact same body and title and that same weird email in the CC line.
So you're really good at catching spam, malware, all sorts of trickery, but you're not really good at reactive stuff, things like Snapchat or Facebook.
Well, I mean, cough. No, you got to cut that out. So I'm not really that good at Snapchat. I've actually never tried it other than seeing my sisters have it, who, funny enough, are actually older than I am. But they seem to get it, and my daughter enjoys playing with the little filters on there. I don't have it installed on my phone, and I never will. And something that frightened me this week is my wife told me our daughter was practicing her duck face for Snapchat and selfies. She was trying to figure out how to get her upper lip to touch the bottom of her nose. And that's horrifying to me. It's she was playing with her friend on the school bus with her friend at an iPod Touch, so I don't think she's taking the school bus anymore.
You know what? That's the only good response, I think. Proper parenting means isolating your child from those who might endanger them. At what point do you start having that conversation with your kid, though, right? So it's the do's and don'ts of social media and the internet, because she's reaching that age slowly but surely, right?
Yeah, she just turned 8 at last month. So it's starting to get to the point where I'm starting to worry about these things. We're starting to think about what to talk about with her and what to share and what not to. I mean, she doesn't have an iPad or any sort of thing. The kids use our old iPad, my iPad 2. I'd started her with an iCloud account just so that she can start playing around with the text messaging. I didn't want her to be left out. The texts that 7 and 8-year-olds send each other are sort of ridiculous. And we realized it was kind of a waste of time for her, so we kind of cut that off for now. We turned off notifications. It's still set up to get text messages, but they kind of delete themselves after a few days.
Is there a guidebook you're following, or are there online resources that you're using to sort of gauge what you should be doing in terms of non-IRL interactions?
Well, lucky enough, the other parent in this equation is a professional. My wife's a teacher, and in fact teaches at the school that our kid goes to. So that kind of helps us understand how we should limit things. My wife's really good at understanding that stuff. I mean, she deals. Oh, God damn
Oh, that was pretty good.
it! It's not gonna get old for you, is it? So my wife understands how this works. It's her job to know how kids deal with these things, and she's had training in this, so she understands where and when we should limit. But just like everyone else, it's her own kid. It always becomes different when it's your own kid and how to deal with technology. So it's a learning curve. I think we're doing an okay job.
Speaking of learning curves, though, like this whole podcast experience, setting it up and getting it out has also been a learning curve for both of us.
It's been really interesting because did we establish I listen to a lot of podcasts? I think we established that.
You perhaps have mentioned it in passing once or twice.
And it's interesting to see how the sausage is made, so to speak.
Is there anything that kind of surprises you about this?
How easy it was to get our show on iTunes. It really wasn't. Actually, I didn't do anything. You did most of that, but it sounded like it wasn't a super complicated process, right?
No, not at all. I mean, you submit and then you wait to hear back. But it was weird because I had, a vanity search just to see when it would pop up, and I never got an approval email from Apple, but there it was.
It showed up Tuesday morning?
No, before that.
It was before that? Okay, because we were talking on Saturday, and you had submitted it to Stitcher, I think, already?
Yeah, Stitcher, and that took no time at all. But with iTunes, usually takes a couple of days, which is why we pushed the first episode out early.
And we got the RSS feed. I put that into Overcast, which then with the iTunes directory, and it automatically goes into Overcast. And I'm sure we're in the other podcast apps as well. I haven't really tried anything other than Apple's podcast app and Overcast.
So we're out and about and we're free into the world, and this is, where we're at. And in searching for things, I discovered earlier today, and I shared this with you, that we have a Spanish sister cast.
Yeah, it was kind of fun to see that we searched quite a while to make sure that we weren't copying anybody's name, and I was pretty pleased when we finally found the name, because we worked through a few titles for the show, right?
Right.
And it was fun to kind of figure out what we were going to use, and we noticed that I liked the idea of having a diskette as our artwork. You liked it too. And then I kind of came across the fact that, we can call ourselves Double Density because there's two of us, and we're sort of dense sometimes. And it's a lot of fun. And it worked out. There were no other podcasts called Double Density.
No, well, except for today when we discovered the Doble Densidad podcast, which is out of Mexico, and it's also a technological diary of sorts. I mean, I can't...
It's prolific.
I don't really listen to a lot of Spanish speakers, so I couldn't tell you much about what it's about beyond the fact that it is technologically inclined. So,
but he's released like 45 episodes since January.
Yeah, he's pretty much doing almost daily.
And I didn't look to see how long the episodes were, but is he like talking for 10 minutes, 20 minutes? I couldn't. Where I looked, it didn't say how long the episodes were.
You know what? Give me a second. They're about 20 minutes each.
Okay, so that's not too bad. He probably just, instead of writing a blog, he just goes on and talks about it.
Yeah, so in the newest episode, for example, he talks about Windows 10, YouTube, using Chrome OS on a Surface versus a MacBook, etc., etc.
Maybe we'll do a crossover one day.
I highly doubt it unless your Spanish or his English is amazing, but let's keep that open, shall we?
Good idea.
Double Density.
So, we had a bit of a very slight bit of follow-up from last episode when I mentioned the backfire effect. And it was timely this week that one of the best webcomics, in my opinion, the Oatmeal. I don't know if you've ever seen the Oatmeal or visited his site at all, Brian.
I definitely have come across this product on the internet.
It's extraordinarily funny, a little profane at times, a lot of fun though. And he had a comic about the backfire effect this week, and it pretty much sums it up perfectly, right?
Yeah, I mean, it is a little lengthy, but absolutely.
Yeah, it's a long comic, but worth the read. A lot of fun. because as he goes on, he says, okay, does this offend you? I was offended by none of it.
Right.
But I guess because he seems to have a similar mentality I do about this stuff, so it kind of didn't bother me. But I'm sure some of the stuff he said would have upset some people.
I absolutely agree with you, because I think it is anytime there's internal questioning, or the questioning of self, I think that like people are reticent to sort of look inwards, whereas we spend all of our time talking about ourselves here on Double Density, so we're doing pretty okay.
I think we're all right. So this year, I celebrated a bit of an anniversary last week.
Is an important milestone in your life?
I remember the day perfectly. It was April 24th. It was sunny, and the UPS man rang the doorbell around 4:30, and I got my Apple Watch on the launch day. One of the few lucky people to get an Apple Watch on launch day, because I ordered one with the blue band. Nobody wanted the blue band ones, and they sent them out pretty quick. And I can't believe it's already been 2 years of the Apple Watch.
Aren't you the belle of the Apple Watch ball then?
So the Apple Watch, a lot of people wonder about it. I like it quite a bit. I've always liked watches. I stopped wearing one for a while.
Well, the thing too is that you also have an iPhone, which helps.
But you kind of forget how convenient it is to have the time on your wrist. But one of my reasons for getting the Apple Watch is I really wanted to track my fitness a little better. I do like to exercise. I like to stay in shape. And the Apple Watch does help me realize that all the walking I do throughout the week does count as a lot of exercise. So over the past 2 years, it's been really helpful in making and allowing me to make sure I stay on top of my fitness, because as I grow old, and I want to be able to keep playing with my kids.
So do you feel like this has made a positive change in your life? Like, do you actively monitor it? Do you adjust accordingly?
So that's the thing, right? The adjustment is what is helpful, because I'll be able to see that if I'm not being active enough, it'll kind of nudge me in the direction of wanting to make sure I keep on top of my exercise. It's sort of if I look down at my wrist and don't see those little green, red, and blue circles closed, it kind of reminds you that I should get up off the couch, stop watching Netflix, and go exercise a little for a bit. The thing is that they wanted to initially make it like a small iPhone with all these apps. And to be honest, I think I have one app installed on there that's not part of the watch.
I mean, functionally speaking, it seems kind of limited in screen space and size too, right? So making effective apps for such a small screen seems kind of difficult to do.
In practice, you're right. It's kind of hard. There's a few things that work well. The music app is great to skip songs. The thing is, in where we live, 5 months out of the year, it's kind of a hassle if I'm on the go, to tap my watch to change song or to raise the volume, because we're wearing giant coats. But now that it's warming up, it's getting a lot easier. So I'm enjoying being able to skip tracks and raise the volume and stuff with the watch.
So beyond the watch, though, you're also towing the company line in that you also have the Apple AirPods.
Yeah, that's another thing. I went out and got day one. I remember joking with you that morning, saying, "Are you waiting in line?" And you said you were having an out of body experience, waiting in line there for the AirPods. It was really cold, and when I walked by that morning, because I walk by the Apple Store every day, not because for religious reasons or anything, but it's on the way to work.
Do you do the sign of the apple as you walk by, though?
I used to. I stopped.
Okay, so you're sort of lapsed.
I'm a bit lapsed, yeah.
Okay.
I do wave, though. I went on my lunch break, and they had just come out of the shipping container, basically. They were still cold. So I bought a pair, and I've been using them since. And this week, it's interesting. It's been, I guess, almost, I can't believe, almost 5 months already that they've been out. I got them at the end of December. And there's a satisfaction survey that was recently released. And I have to agree. I'm completely satisfied. I think it's one of the best products Apple's released in years.
But do you feel like there's a small amount of positive bias coming that way too?
From me?
No, just in general with the satisfaction survey, because those numbers are outrageous. I don't know if you took a look.
Yeah, I took a look at it. It's pretty crazy. So I'm wondering if it's, how people, they always kind of defend what they buy, even if they buy garbage.
Well, I think it's also defending, like, being on brand means being able to defend things like AirPods when they're not necessarily the best thing in the world, but they're better than having nothing, I guess.
But so the thing is with that, I wonder, nothing else seems to have this highest satisfaction, not even the iPhone, not the Apple Watch, that's for sure. And people that would have spent that much money on an Apple Watch would kind of defend it. I like my Apple Watch, but I've told people it's not for everyone. It's not necessarily worth spending $500 on that. With AirPods, they seem expensive, right? But they're actually not if you compare them to the exact same type of product. So any earbuds that don't have any wires attached to them will cost you more than the AirPods. And they work so well. I haven't had many glitches with it, and Bluetooth stuff is usually pretty crummy. The only time I have trouble with them, and this only happens in the winter, and it happens with everything I have that's Bluetooth, is we have an automatic car starter, and anytime we use that, it totally throws off Bluetooth on all my devices.
Almost like an EMP. Maybe it's an anti-Apple agent working in your part of the world.
Sort of like an anti-Apple EMP.
Yeah, exactly. I think it might be rods, though.
Damn rods, they screw everything. I haven't seen them as much since we stopped using interlaced video, though.
I thought you wouldn't bring up the methodology behind that. I thought we were keeping that secret, but I guess not. A double density PSA. Don't you dare copy that floppy. Or copy it, who cares? Double density. So welcome back to the Double Density Podcasts, and things always kind of surprise me and excite me in different ways. And this week, you and I were talking, and I had mentioned the concept of creepypasta tea, which you're not familiar with at all.
I had never heard of it, and all the times I go on the internet and look at fun paranormal stuff or consider myself a student of the internet, I understand how it works, I know the culture behind it. If I had heard the term creepypasta, I've probably forgotten it.
Great. So Urban Dictionary describes creepypasta as a disturbing ghost or horror stories in general that lurk through the interwebs, mainly on 4chan's B channel. So for those unaware, 4chan is an image board where one commonly posts anonymously. The B channel is for random bits of ephemera. It's given rise to things like the Anonymous Movement, lolcats, Rickrolling, the game Cards Against Humanity, and popularizing things like Chocolate Rain by Tezlande, which we spoke about last week.
So wait, Cards Against Humanity came from 4chan?
What had happened is that they had started posting on 4chan, they started these threads together, and then suddenly it had taken on this air, and these friends decided that since they were having so much fun, they turned their 4chan musings into real-life musings to much success.
Well, one of the creators of Cards Against Humanity hosts one of my favorite podcasts, shockingly.
I wonder if we can go one episode without you referring to something you listen to.
No.
So this was originally called Copypasta, and so the name Creepypasta is a subset of scary stories that are sort of based around people creating things. So Creepypasta is the online equivalent to telling ghost stories around a campfire, only this time around it's done via audio and visual media as well as text. Urban legends and myths are also created and then perpetuated first on 4chan and then throughout the larger internet. So there's like a trickle-down effect almost of a lot of these myths.
So you mentioned 4chan. That's something I really don't know much about other than the stories I've heard here and there, but maybe that's why I didn't know much about creepypasta.
I've spent a marginal amount of time on 4chan, I guess would be the best way of putting it. Like, I'm not a 4chan troll by any means. I've never actually posted. I don't have much interest in it. And once in a while, I'll pop around, and I really enjoy. So they have these things called green text stories, which is stories about how 4chaners have failed in their lives or have been tricked and stuff. So it's a lot of fun to read that. And so this week, we were reading an article about a supposed lost PlayStation 1 game called Petscop. So this guy's been uploading YouTube videos of this playthrough, and it actually a lot of the game is tied into like children disappearances, murders.
It's really creepy, and I watched a couple of the videos, and if it's not a real PlayStation 1 game, it's really convincingly made.
So do you think so honestly, I do believe that it is a hoax. I don't think it's a PlayStation 1 game that was made and unfinished.
So you think somebody recently programmed it?
For sure. I mean, if you take a look at the amount of media created in the name of creepypasta online, either through YouTube or Vimeo or even just going through 4chan threads themselves, which, you know, clicker beware, of course. People spend a lot of time creating things, and this seems like right up the alley of someone who got bored and wanted to tell some kind of scary story. So some of the More famous creepypastas include things like Slender Man.
That's something that, with all the quote unquote real paranormal stuff, Slender Man's one of the creepiest things, and it's a complete work of fiction, right? It's documented as to when it came out, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So the beginnings of Slender Man, and then after the initial story, if you take a look on YouTube and you type in Slender Man, you can go through.
I don't want to do that though, because whenever I see an image of Slender Man, it's nightmarish. I have a lot of trouble with that. It's established that between you and I that I'm not a big believer in the paranormal. I believe that people see what they say they see and all that stuff, but it's probably not extraordinary or anything. It's just a mistake or whatever. But Slender Man, of all that stuff, really creeps me out. It's horrifying to me. He looks like either the ghost of Abraham Lincoln or Robert Wadlow,
Who was the tallest man on Earth? What, like 100 years ago, I think.
Yeah, turn of the 19th century at this point. No, 20th century. Wow. Yeah, turn of the 20th century. He was, I remember seeing his picture in the Guinness Book of World Records when I was a kid and being creeped out by his picture back then too. He was almost 9 feet tall.
Is he as scary or less scary than Slender Man?
I don't know, less scary, significantly less scary. But Slender Man looks like the evil ghost version of him.
Right, so unfortunately, the tale of Slender Man was taken quite literally by 2 teenage girls in the States a couple of years ago. So HBO aired a documentary called Beware the Slender Man earlier this year that sort of covers the plight of these 2 girls and how, unfortunately, the lines between reality and fiction kind of blur for a number of reasons for people, be it mental illness or other mitigating factors. But beyond that, I mean, so the interesting thing about a lot of these creepypasta beyond Slender Man are that they usually involve things that preoccupy 10-year-olds. And what I mean about that is that there are a bunch of semi-famous creepypasta about Pokemon. So there's the story of the Lavender Town Syndrome, which is an alleged child murder conspiracy that suggests that any players who hear the Lavender Town theme from the original versions of the Japanese Pokemon games, so Red and Green, die or kill themselves.
That's really creepy.
Yeah, there's also
you're making the hair on my neck stand up.
There's also another famous one called Smile.jpg, which is a story about an image that haunts the viewer, and oftentimes it's a Photoshop picture of a dog smiling or staring off. And there's also a story about
it's really creepy,
Jeff the Killer, which is a story usually accompanied with a pic of a noseless dude who grins a lot.
See, so I'm not going to look any of this up.
There's a story about SpongeBob SquarePants' friend Squidward dying and how that is a lost episode that never existed, blah, blah, blah. But then there's also some unintentionally funny ones. So I'm going to do a dramatic reading of one of my favorites, which is a classic from 9 or 10 years ago called, and this is all caps, Then Who Was Phone? So Angelo, I'd like you to settle in, get ready. Are you ready for this?
I'm listening.
So you're with your honey and you're making out when the phone rings. You answer it and the voice is, "What are you doing with my daughter?" You tell your girl and she say, "My dad is dead." Then who was phone?
The end?
The end.
Wow. That so
not as chilling as Slender Man, obviously.
No, that didn't creep me out. That it sort of reminded me of how is Babby formed.
Oh, for sure. Gosh, how girl get pregnant. One of the best Yahoo answers of all time, really. So what I find really interesting about creepypasta is it's almost like a logical progression of things like found footage horror films. So lore that appeared to be quote unquote real. So, in the early days of horror cinema, it was very artificially constructed. You could obviously tell that like these were actors and this was a set. And then in the last 25 to 30 years, I feel like there's a subset of horror movies that have really concentrated on realism. So striving to break down the barrier between film and viewer. And I feel like creepypasta is a natural extension of this in the way that, it's stories are told in a way where there's a familiar element to it. And then suddenly, there's a bad ending or there's a creep factor there that is very effective.
In terms of film, did it start with the Blair Witch Project?
I feel like it was popularized by the Blair Witch Project, but there was a lot of underground shot on home grade consumer video cameras, like high 8 stuff in the early 90s that unless you're a fan of horror movies, they weren't really out there for you. But now through the power of the internet, there's all these people rediscovering a lot of these. I wouldn't use the words lost classics, but lost motion pictures that have existed. But I definitely do agree that Blair Witch did not kick down the door, but like blew open the door for this sort of thing.
And for the record, I saw that in the theater when it came out. I was really excited about it. Everybody kept talking how it was going to be great, and I found it really boring.
I saw it when I was 12. So when it came out, I was 12 or 13.
God, you're a baby.
Saw it in movie theaters, and then in the interim, a number of years had passed. I had actually gotten lost in the woods in the meantime, and then watched it again, and then I found it to be very effective the second time around because I had that real world sort of connection to it. So the first time I didn't really care about it, but the second time I definitely felt it was much more effective because I did spend a certain amount of time lost in the woods one afternoon, unfortunately, and I sort of those feelings came to the surface a bit, so I found it was more effective.
And there is a segment of the film going population that will think some of these things are actually real, right? You'd hope not, but I've heard of people thinking that Paranormal Activity was based on a true story and that's actual found footage.
I feel like those people are called suckers.
And speaking of found footage movies, actually, you turned me on to one of the most interesting alien type scary movies, and it's one of the segments from VHS 2.
Right, the one where it's shot mostly in a GoPro.
That was one of the best alien invasion films, short films, I guess, I've ever seen. It was horrifying.
One of the most effective ways in which something like that would go down. I felt it was so effective because of the medium that it presented, right? So a GoPro suggests realism, and then, the whole story of these kids and their parents leave, and
the dog dies too, right?
Yeah, he gets taken up and then dropped, I think, at the end.
Yeah, it was awful.
Yeah, it was.
It's funny how I don't care if people die, but when you hurt a pet, it pisses me off.
Well, I mean, there's that whole website about finding out if dogs die in movies or not, right? So
I heard about that, yeah.
But yeah, it was truly effective, and I feel like it was mostly effective because of the way in which the story was told. Technically speaking, a lot of people devote their time to creating audio and visual materials to accompany the lore that exists out there, right? And it's that idea, like I was saying, they take something familiar and then sort of morph it into something kind of scary. And some of it is obviously kind of hokey, but some of it has an effective element to it, I think, because there's that air of familiarity, and then there's that idea that it could happen to you, and it's all these stories that seem unbelievable yet very plausible at the same time, and I think it's very effective, but it also strikes that fine line between hokey and like terrifyingly real.
Well, the Petscop one is incredibly well done, and if somebody took the time to basically program an entire game, or not an entire game, but segments of a game, it's really effective.
I think it is. I think it's very effective, and I think that another element, so I think like we're establishing kind of criteria for what creepypasta is and what works about it, right? So it's taking a familiar thing, in this case a PlayStation 1 game, and transforming it to something scary, which is all of these weird child murders and abductions, and then
based on possibly on a true story, right? There's a whole, in the article they talk about an actual murder that took place, and there's little mentions of it in the game. So I was watching some of the videos, and so it starts off as a really fun, happy, colorful game, right? And then all of a sudden it becomes really dark, and you're waiting in front of the door. Apparently waited in front of the door for hours. There's one of the videos that shows a windmill, and then it says 2.5 hours later or something like that, and he goes into the windmill. It's extraordinarily creepy and really effective at creeping people out. And that's why some of the comments mentioned that it was creepypasta. And that's where I came across the term for the first time.
I also think it's effective because you don't know the origins of this, right? So it's all this media that's created, but you don't know where it comes from. So I feel like that's also another tenet of successful creepypasta, is taking something and obscuring its origins to such a point that you cannot tell whether it's real or not, especially with a game like this, right? And we'll throw up in the show notes, we'll put in the article and some of the footage, but you can't tell where it comes from necessarily, right? So you don't know what to believe in or what the parameters for believing in it are.
Can this be what's happened with some paranormal stories, right? Like Bigfoot, did somebody kind of create this idea and now people are seeing it. Like some people claim to have seen Slender Man, even though we know for a fact that it was only created 7 years ago. Maybe this, because of how Bigfoot is, it's like a long-standing game of telephone where it sort of morphs into something else that it actually that it started from.
I feel like there is a snowball effect with a lot of this kind of stuff, and I do agree that perhaps a lot of the stuff that's sort of talked about in paranormal circles has been created by people and propagated in such a way that it's difficult to find out. Unlike Slenderman, it's difficult to find out who exactly first saw the first Bigfoot, or what the first Bigfoot appearance was, or that sort of minutia
the first
involved.
person to be and the first person to be abducted by a gray.
Right, because there's all these conflicting stories, and there's no timeline established, and so like I do feel like there's a lot of this kind of lore, I guess. Like like I think creepypasta is DIY lore, right? Like you're creating your own myths and your own unknowable kind of things, and then seeing how far it gets out into the world. So I definitely do think that there's a certain amount of paranormal stuff, like you were saying, like Bigfoot. Who knows, right?
Well, yeah, and even some of the alien stuff, the whole idea of these weird bug-eyed gray aliens kidnapping people.
Who are these people, and why does this continue to exist? And I think it continues to exist and fascinate people because of the fact that it's scary fun. It's also sort of safe kind of fun because it uses those things that you sort of recognize.
It is fun. It just talking about it now, it's creeping me out, but in a fun way. Well, fun way. I mean, like I'll sleep tonight. It's not going to be a big deal, but it is really freaky to think about that. Especially the smile JPEG thing. That I don't even know what you're talking about. I haven't seen it. But all I know is I don't want to see it.
Well, you will sooner or later, I think. But I mean, another interesting kind of offshoot is people who borrow from the creepypasta lore. So there's a really funny / sad SVU episode that borrows from the case of the two girls who see Slender Man, and I would suggest going to take a look at it if you want. I think it's hilarious. That's just me, but once again, it's that typical SVU spin on things. But beyond that, I don't know if you've heard of a game called Five Nights at Freddy's.
Yes, I have. I've watched PewDiePie play it.
Right, so Five Nights at Freddy's kind of reminds me of creepypasta in that it has all the hallmarks of a successful DIY lore story. So the idea of familiarity, the player is working as an overnight security guard at a Chuck E. Cheese style eatery, and I feel like that sort of basis to it kind of borrows from creepypasta culture in that it is familiar yet not, and it could happen to you yet it could not.
What I've seen of Five Nights at Freddy's, is that what it's called, right?
Yep.
It's exactly like you say. It's something that's sort of plausible, but not really. Is it based in reality, or do the robots actually try and kill the guy? I can't remember.
The robots try and kill the guy.
Okay, so it's not really based in reality, but it is still, if you were a night watchman at a weird Chuck E. Cheese type place, it could get really creepy, right?
And I think another interesting aspect of the game is that it's a first-person game. It's not a third-person game, right? So it puts you right into there, and that's why the jump scares are so effective when these animatronic animals make their way closer and closer to you as you look away to check out their cameras.
Well, it's like that old maze game. Remember that game on somebody would send you those flash games? Oh, go through the maze, and you'd be playing, and as the levels would go up, the mazes would get harder and harder, and you kind of get your face closer and closer to the computer, and that's when that face would pop up and scare the crap out of you.
Right. So you fell for it, is what you're saying.
The first time, of course I fell for it. This was like the early 2000s. We didn't know anything about computers.
Perfect. So you're just so creepypasta is just continuing the tradition of scaring the crap out of you in different ways using audio and visual media.
The thing is now, especially just watching the Petscop game, it's really, really well done, and it's that's what's so scary about it, is that it's almost plausible that somebody created this bizarre PlayStation game, and it's only just now been found, which adds to the creepiness of it. It's like somebody hid it away somewhere to hide it from all mankind and never be able to find this horrible, horrible game that somebody created with these awful ideas. And now somebody's found it and is sharing it on YouTube for all to see.
See, now you're adding to the lore, which is, that idea of communal sharing of a lot of these tales, right? Which is great.
Well, yeah, the programmer who created it was had a connection to the child that was actually murdered.
Here, let's take a step back, right? So like, there's have you considered the narrative around, because these are these videos for this PlayStation game are introduced via a let's play model, right? So have you considered the idea of where this narrative is going?
No, actually, I haven't.
Because that's something that struck me today when I was thinking about it, is that, you know, we're being led on this journey by this person who's doing this voiceover, who's playing the game, right? And
Is he gonna die?
Yeah, who knows, right? Like, who knows where this is going? And I find that very intriguing, right? And I think that's part of the reason why I'm going to continue to subscribe to this channel and see where it goes. Because
he's part of the whole thing.
Absolutely.
And then you'll realize the YouTube video is coming from inside your house.
Yeah, and the phone rings, and then you say, then who was phone? Double density. So from iPhones all the way to missing or misplaced PlayStation video games to smile.jpg, which apparently scares Angelo, I feel like episode 3 has covered a lot of different grounds. And I feel like as we continue creating this podcast and sort of exploring the vast territory in between tech and the paranormal, there's a lot more there to do, right?
There's a lot. There's so many connections between the two.
And I feel like, you know, the listener also can help us out. So if you want to reach us out through our socials, you can hit us up on Twitter. So it's double_density, not double density, but double little line density. You can hit us up on Facebook. You can look up the Double Density Podcast, or you can just go to facebook.com/Double Density Podcast. Same thing with Instagram. We're at Double Density Podcast, one word. And now we're on all of the services. We're on iTunes. We're on Stitcher. You can find us in the podcast directory. You can find us on a number of podcast apps if you look up a Double Density.
On SoundCloud too.
Right, on SoundCloud, which is rather, that's the OG place to find us. That's where we upload our files that then get propagated. We are also on YouTube. Sadly, no URL yet, because you have to hit that threshold of 100 followers and stuff.
On YouTube, yeah?
Yep. So we're not there yet with the vanity URL, but we are going to be. I believe we can be. Completely unrelated, if you want to go ahead and give us a review, give us a 5-star rating on iTunes, and also leave a review or leave a recipe. We don't really care about that, right? As long as you leave some kind of comment on our iTunes page, that'd be really great, in the iTunes store.
Yeah, we're going to be, are we in the technology paranormal section?
We are. We're right under a double densidad. This has been episode 3 of the Double Density Podcast, and tune in next week as we learn about the wonders of war driving.
See ya.
Bye!